Hello, everyone. It is episode 3, and I'm with a very special guest. He's a certified NBA agent
The creator of Storybook.
and someone who cares deeply about the lives of athletes in basketball and obviously other things too. But welcome, Sean. How are you?
Hey Irvin, how you doing? Thanks for having me, man.
Let's just start with the pitch. Tell everyone where you're from and what you do.
Yeah, for sure. So, my real name is Sean Huynh. I'm in Toronto, Canada. As mentioned, I'm a certified NBA agent. I also run a company called Storybook Sports, which is uh, a company that is helping athletes grow their social media following. We believe that marketing piece is really important, and we're trying to do is simplify that piece for these athletes so they can focus on the main thing, which is like their encore performance. So we try to take some of that lift of dealing with social media and creating content and getting followers. We try to take that off their plate.
And what led you to want to do that? To jump into that realm?
Yeah. So I'll tell you a little bit about like my journey as a agent. So I started seriously thinking about this probably about January last year. So it's been about a year and a half. I seeded the idea. And I ended up going to this course in Vegas, which is coming up during summer league. It's called Sports Business Classroom. And so it was just a really good jump off point for me to learn
Hmm.
about the business of sports, meeting some people. And then I got officially certified as an MBPA agent in February. And the one thing I did notice is that what these players are looking for is you got to add value to those relationships, right? For them to like trust you, to them to want to work with you and to represent them. And I think that every player wants an amazing social media presence, right?
Hmm.
But a lot of players either don't have the time or they're not that interested or they don't know how to do it. So I think having some structure around that, because like with NIL, it's like a big
Yeah.
thing.
Hmm.
And so players that aren't kind of building their personal brand, if their on poor performance is great, like it doesn't really matter. Like let's
Yeah.
be honest. If you're,
Yeah.
I don't know, Anthony Edwards or Wembanyama, like it doesn't really matter. But
Hmm.
for a lot of the players, like, it's important to build that social media following. And so I looked at Storybook as a way to add value to the relationships I had with players and their families.
Hmm.
As I'm, building out my relationships and potential clients I'm looking to sign as an agent.
Hmm. And then going back to that Vegas trip, um, can you just walk us through the actual process and how that comes about for you and your journey?
Yeah, for sure. So it's pretty simple. Like I did some research. There's a gentleman by the name of Larry Kuhn. He's kind of like known as the godfather of the CBA.
Hmm.
Um, and so, if you want to be an agent, you have to understand the CBA, and the CBA stands for the collective bargaining agreement, right? That's like the
Hmm.
collectively bargained agreement between the Players Association and the league. And so, I was like on Larry's website. He has something I think it's called CBA FAQ, and I started like reading it, and it's like a very dense like
Yeah.
text, right? So Larry kind of offered a course. Like, he was
Hmm.
like the main figurehead for this course called Sports Business Classroom. So I did some research and I said, you know what, like if I'm gonna do this, I might as well just, give it the best chance I have. So
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
I enrolled in the course and it's in summer league. Like for anyone listening, Sports Business Classroom, if you're looking to get into the NBA, is amazing. Like there's a lot of seminars and stuff out there. And going in, I was a bit skeptical. I'm like, is this really going to be that good? But it's like you get all access to summer league. It's very immersive. You're with a bunch of people, like I don't know, maybe there's like 100, maybe 150 students that are all fanatical about the NBA. So you're meeting some like amazing people and contacts,
Hmm.
and I would definitely recommend it to anyone who's looking to get a start in sports.
And you did an internship with a group, right?
Yeah. So coming out of that, actually at summer league, I met Terrell Harris. He was the president, chairman, CEO of Unique Sports, and I ended up doing an internship with him. I worked with him for last season. He taught me quite a bit about the business, and I was fortunate enough to spend some time with one of his clients, Kevin O'Banner, who was on Raptors 905, and I was with Kevin for the bulk of the year at 905. Like, I'm a Toronto guy, so it ended up working out great. I learned a lot about Kevin as an individual, and I wish him all the best. He's one of my favorite guys in the league. And also learned about sort of the trials and tribulations of being in the NBA G League, which is, it's an interesting kind of league in itself.
Yeah. Well, that was going to be my next question. It's going to be, what are some of the challenges that you've recently discovered that maybe you didn't know before you jumped into it?
Where do I start, man? It's a very competitive business, right? Like, sports in general is just very competitive. Being an agent is ultra competitive. I think there's 800 plus certified agents. I think there's only maybe less than 200, maybe like 150 agents that actually have players in the league, maybe even less than that. So most of the agents, they go through the certification process and they're not able to sign clients, right? So I think that's kind of why the idea around Storybook kind of came about, because I realized that this was like something that players needed, and I wanted to add value to the relationship so that they can trust me, right? Like, I think we talked about this in the pre-show. If a player is like a lottery pick, most of those players are signing with, the big agencies, right? Like the Wassermans, the Clutch, the CAAs, the Excel Sports. So as like an up and coming agent who is trying to make his way, you need to like find your niche, right? Add value and build like that long-term relationship if you want to be successful, right? So I think you have to have like a long-term view in these things. So that's one thing, right? Like, expecting immediate results is probably not the best thing to do, because you're probably not going to get those results right away. You need to kind of work at it and be methodical about it, have a strategy, execute that strategy, and be patient.
Yeah, no, I think the business idea of it is fantastic, especially like you mentioned with NIL. I mean, I'm going through that personally because I'm in college right now. But yeah, there's a big need to market, and that's what it is. Like, you're just trying to sell yourself, right? And this sort of allows the athlete to focus on basketball while sort of bringing in that social media factor. Would you say that's sort of accurate?
Yeah. So, like, on a top level, again, the priority is always going to be on-court performance, right? If you are one of the best 10, 20 players in your class, it honestly doesn't matter what you do on social media. Like, that's the honest truth. But for the rest of those players, like, imagine you're trying to get recruited. You're talking to D1 coaches, your parents are helping you, your AAU coaches is, making some calls for you. And you have 500 followers versus you have 5,000 followers, or 10,000 or 25,000 or 50,000. Like, the way we're programmed now as human beings is like, that's what you do. Like, you go to someone's Instagram account, you take a look, and then you make a snap judgment, right? Like, if you have, let me ask you, Irvin, if you see someone who has 500 followers versus 5,000 followers, what do you think?
I'm more likely to follow the person that's got 5,000 because they're cooler, they're seem more interactive. They're going to bring some value to my feed.
Exactly. Right. So there's that initial feeling that, and well, it's not like, I don't think it's fair, but it's the world, right? That the person who has 5,000 followers potentially, like, likely is better and has more value than the person with 500 followers. Right. And if you're talking about NIL, where like you're monetizing your name, image, and likeness, part of that is you need to have a following. Right. And so, again, priority number one is on-court performance. If you're elite, if you're exceptional in basketball and in that skill, marketing dollars will come. But for if you look at the NBA, there's like 450 players in the NBA, something like that. It's 15 players in every roster and 30 teams. There's maybe 50 that are like household names that everyone just knows who they are. Maybe 100. But there's another 300 plus players that, kind of unknown, right? So I think building that social media following is good. And also the other thing when I talk to parents and players about is it's not just like getting recruited. So let's say you're like in grade 11 in high school and you are an amazing player, but you only have, let's say, 500 followers.
Mhm.
If you start to like build the engine and you start to build some content, and you don't like, I'm not saying you go crazy, like you don't have to go Jared McCain, right? Like Jared McCain is like the extreme opposite. And he's done extremely well. Like kudos to him, right? He's like
Yeah.
figured out TikTok and he's killing it. But you don't have to go to that extreme. But if you start to build a network, regardless of what happens to you, let's say you make it to D1. Making it to D1 is like hard.
Yeah.
And the athletes that make it to D1 basketball are some of the best in the world. But only a small percentage of those are going to actually make it into the G League, into the NBA. So, but if you build a following, you like the world's your oyster, right? Like if you want to train, you want to do camps, you want to release a apparel brand, you want to just be a content creator, like you have so many more options, right? And so again, the whole point of this is to simplify things for the players so that we're helping them deliver on this without taking away from the main thing, which is the on-court performance in basketball.
And we spoke about this before about that long-term view. You might get a career-ending injury. You're not going to be dribbling the basketball for your whole life, and at some point, you still need to be able to, I guess, make money and sort of do other things besides that on-court performance. But yeah, so I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, we did talk about this, right? Like everyone stops dribbling the ball at some point, right? And then they can start back up. Like for me, I never made my high school team. I was the captain of my grade 8 team. So I guess I was like 12 or something. I was the best shooter on my team. But when I got to grade 9, it's like everyone had a growth spurt, but I didn't. And I tried out for my grade 9 team and I got cut. And I remember being like, I can't believe I went from being the captain of my team to being cut because like I just like physically I couldn't keep up. And so I literally stopped playing basketball in high school. Like I abandoned it. But I always loved it. And I always followed the sport. And then I picked it up again in my early 20s. So at that point, I started to kind of play a little bit more pickup, and I ran like a league for a little bit. I ran a league called Toronto Ballers Club in my early 20s for about four years. And it was a great experience. There's contacts I've made from that league that I still talk to this day. But I took a long time away from basketball, like for my mid 20s all the way into my basically basically into my late 30s. I wasn't, really active in the basketball community, but I really started to pick things up a couple years ago. Like I'm 41 years old. So like maybe when I was like 39, 40, I started to like think about it again. So you can stop dribbling, but it doesn't have to go away, and you can take a break and come back. Like there's no one saying that, hey, you have to like maintain doing this forever. People that do it forever, like good for them. Like they make those connects, right? But yeah, I guess like to the point of NIL, these players are making generational money in college, some of them. Right. And so you're going to see players spending more years in college because the NIL money is there. And, if you can make $1, $2, $3, $4 million when you're in college, that's a pretty sweet place. Right.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
I mean, I'll tell you this versus the G League. I'll give you an example. I was at Marquette last season for a game. It was a 5-star forum, packed, 17,000 people there. The vibe was electric. And then the next night, I was in a G League game in Chicago. And it was like the Windy City Bulls, I think they're called. It was empty. It's like 200 people. It was like the vibe was like completely dead. And so it's like, if you just look at it from a purely experience perspective, like, do you want to go and play 17,000 people, have an amazing time, and get paid some pretty good money? Or do you want to go slug it out into the G League? Now, I get it. The G League is the feeder league for the NBA. So I think it's there. But for some of these players who maybe have thinking about, declaring for their draft after their sophomore year, or maybe after their junior year, The way the NIL money is, like 1 or 2 more years is not a bad thing.
Yeah. I mean, sometimes you have those like athletes that did really well their freshman year, and then they declare, but then their career kind of just goes on a decline because perhaps they weren't ready for it. And yeah, and then to your point about those the fan engagement, I mean, it's true. I mean, like that the sort of environment that like you went to the university you went to,
Yeah, Marquette.
yeah, Marquette. Yeah, the experience is totally different. Totally different.
It's totally different, and I think that like um, to your point about being ready, it's it's interesting because like if you look at the draft, a lot of the high draft picks are freshmen, so they're one and dones,
Mhm.
right? So I feel like there's like two opposite ends of the spectrum. I should look at the data before I said it, but just anecdotally, this is what I think. I think that for the super, super high level, like lottery pick type players, they're skewing younger, right? Like
Mhm.
the NBA, they want to draft guys that they can develop and they want to have them under team control for many years. And I think the way the CBA is structured, it's they have the benefit of doing that. With bird rights and that type of thing, you can
Mhm.
you can keep your players longer, right? With the rookie extensions, just the way the CBA is set up, it's good for teams to keep their players.
Mhm.
But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, when you get into like the later rounds and into like the second round, you'll see like some more like those seniors, right, come out. So I think there's something to be said about like the maturity of staying in school for the full 4 years and getting that experience and then coming out. That could set you up for longer term success as opposed to like, coming out too early.
Yeah. And like on the agent side of things, when you're looking at a player, what are some of those factors that are like sort of, I guess, separating one from another? Because I think you've seen Savian play, you've seen Cooper Flag play. What do
Yeah.
you think? What do you think those guys do differently, or you know, sort of that makes them a little more attractive as an agent to want to reach out to those kind of guys?
Well, you mentioned two guys like Xavier and Cooper, and both of them are, I think, like transcendent talents.
Hmm.
Xavier, for one, like he's a local guy in Toronto. I got to meet him last year, and I built like a relationship with him. And he's just a really intelligent guy. He's like a dynamite player. Right? He's a very
Hmm.
dynamic player. Cooper, like I went to a bunch of tournaments last year, and Cooper was like clearly the best player in high school. And I saw him like AJ DeBensa, and I saw Cameron Boozer, and I saw Jace Richardson, and I saw Tyron Stokes. A lot of amazing high school players, but Cooper's on like a different level. And I think what makes Cooper different is his intensity. Like, yes, he has all the tools, but his intensity is like next level. Like he'll take
Hmm.
over games. And so, but to go back to your original question, like what I'm typically looking for in players is a combo of like these four things. And I usually don't get that right away, but at some point, I want to figure these four things out. And I'm looking for the player to be at least elite in at least one area,
Hmm.
preferably more than one. Right. So it's size, shooting, athleticism, and attitude. Right. So maybe like elite and attitude is not like that important, but I think for the top three, size, shooting, athleticism, those are the things I'm typically looking for. Right. And it's relative, like size at their position.
Hmm.
If you're elite in one of those three things, elite,
Yeah.
you'll get my attention. And then the attitude and kind of like the personality piece, it takes time to understand that because like, you can't really get that from just watching a few games, right? That's when
Hmm.
you have to like talk to their AAU coach and maybe get to know their parents and talk to the player and kind of understand how they engage with you and how they are. And so that fourth piece, the attitude and the character piece, it takes time to understand. But I think when you watch enough basketball, the top three, shooting, size, athleticism, you can usually like pick like point that out pretty quickly.
And then with size, if you could elaborate. So from what I'm seeing and how I see, I guess, the future of the league, I think we're gonna see a lot of taller guards as the league progresses.
Yeah.
Like, obviously, if you watch the draft, you'd see a lot of those 7-footers being drafted, and they play like guards. Frankly,
Yeah.
is that the same for you? Like, do you see the league progressing that way?
Well, I think a couple of things I'm seeing is like being able like switchability on defense is
Mhm.
really important. You'll see in the NBA now, like they're switching everything, right? So
Mhm.
if you can't guard all 5 positions, that's going to put you at a disadvantage. So that's part of the reason why you see bigger guards. Because if you have smaller guards and you're switching, like you switch a guy who's 6'2" onto Durant, he's just going to shoot right over the top,
Yeah.
right? So I think that's part of why you're seeing that. And then, you know, the game's becoming more open, right? There's much more space now. Like a lot of teams are playing 5 out, and it's everyone's got to be able to shoot it, right? So I think shooting is really a premium. And I'll be honest, like I don't think that considering the NBA is like a 3-point league and shooting is so highly valued, I still
Mhm.
don't see a ton of amazing shooters, right? I still think that there's a big gap out there in terms of that specific skill set.
Mhm.
Like it's rare that I'll go into a gym or like a tournament and I'll see more than, you know, a handful of guys who I think are amazing shooters.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's an interesting point. I haven't thought about that one. That's interesting. Yeah. I mean, going back to that NIL stuff, we had I'd say we spoke about Jared McCain for about 10 minutes.
Yeah, we did.
Um, but yeah, he's gone on all sorts of success, and kudos to him. How would you say, for someone that hasn't gotten Storybook just yet, how would you say a young person should sort of moderate their social media and try and market themselves?
Yeah, I think there's levels to it. Um, I think that like authenticity is important. When you look at Jared, he's a generally happy person, right? And
Mm-hmm.
I think he enjoys doing the TikToks. He enjoys doing it. He gets other people involved and he brings joy to the world. So like that's important. And I think it's authentic that he's doing it, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
if people are just doing content for likes and views, I think that's where things kind of fall off, right? But when people do it because they genuinely have a passion for it, I think that's commendable. I think for young players, there's a balance, right? You want to do enough to move the needle, but you don't want to do too much that takes away from things. And I think that goes all the way into the pros. Like we talked about Jared, and you know, I noticed the difference in kind of the comments on his posts when you see them on TikTok versus on Instagram. Right on
Mm-hmm.
TikTok, I think it's very supportive. That's his people. That's his community. But when you see some of his videos get reposted on Instagram, you know, there's a lot of people that kind of hating on it, right? There's people like, hey man, like that's not gonna fly in Philly. And I don't think they're wrong, to be honest. Like Ben Simmons, literally his career, it wasn't destroyed just because of Philly, but that was the beginning of the end,
Yeah.
right? It was literally one layup slash dunk that he gave up, and it was a complete downward spiral from there. So I think that there's a certain level where you want to do it enough to move the needle in your following. But if you're doing it too much, or if you're doing it just and people know you're doing it just for likes and views,
Mm-hmm.
I think people can see through that. And that's where it starts to take away. And again, if any of this stuff becomes a distraction and starts to take away from the on-court performance, then it's better just to like stop,
Mm-hmm.
you know? Like, and if some players say, I don't even want to be on social media, or some parents say to me, I don't even want my son or daughter to have a social media account at all. I'd completely respect that. I think, you know, that's totally fine too.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that's interesting because it's really difficult to do things without social media these days, and that, I guess, having no social media presence would, in a way, make you unique. But I'd also say it puts a little bit more pressure on you to be like an amazing player, like a Jokic or Kawhi Leonard, per se,
Yeah.
where, you know, you're watching them, the marketing side of them, it doesn't really matter because they're so good on the court.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, like I said, there's levels to this, right? And there's going to be always that select few, the cream of the crop, that it doesn't matter what they do. They're gonna make it to the NBA. Like they're just destined to do it. Like they were, like God graced them with the physical tools to make it. But you know, for the rest of everybody, including those that don't make it to pro, I think that it's a tool that you should look to utilize and be strategic about it so that it helps you achieve your goals. Like we talked about Jeremy McCain, right? Like, what's his goal? Like, obviously, his goal to make it to the NBA. So he's done that, right? But now, what is his goal? Does he want to be? I'm assuming he wants to be all NBA. He wants to make all-star teams. He wants to maybe be an MVP conversation at some point. So you have to like, there's a balance. There's give and take with everything. So if you're doing social media, it takes time and effort, right? But everyone has hobbies. So that's the thing, right? Like some guys, they might just kick it and play PlayStation. Like that's what they do. Some guys like they're big into like Lego or whatever, right? Like whatever it is to kind of like get your mind off stuff, that's fine. If Jared's is TikTok, that's okay. But you know, if the encore performance isn't there, especially in a city like Philadelphia, and he's continuing to churn out kind of videos like this, it's going to be harder for him, right? So I think he needs to be mindful of that, and I'm sure he will be as the season progresses. But it'll be an interesting story to see, because like he went from like 2.3 million followers to over 3 million followers, like literally overnight when he got drafted.
Yeah, and I think he has to be careful with his mental health too, right? Because if you're like, say he's just about to go to bed and he's like scrolling through his thing his social media after a bad game, you know, I think even for a lot of players, if they underperform, take Klay Thompson, right? He went 0 for 10 that last game. Still, like almost even posts not related to Klay, we see that, right? And
it's
at some
and
point,
Philly especially, man. And Philly, like they'll chew you up and spit you out in Philadelphia. So it's like it's an interesting market. I wish him the best though. Like I hope he has a great season, and he seems like a great person. And you know, I think sometimes like the old heads, and I could probably consider myself in that. I'm in my 40s, right? So I'm like I'm watching NBA since the 90s, right? So like I'm one of those guys who thinks like 90s basketball was like that was it. But you know, not everyone has to be like Kobe or like Jordan and have to be like super locked in and very serious all the time. You know, I think you can have fun and still be successful and enjoy your life, because at the end of the day, like whatever, man, he's a millionaire. He's just playing basketball, and you know, I wish him all the best.
Yeah, I mean, like to that point, playing basketball. I mean, even for us working in sports, we're paid to watch sports, and he's paid to play basketball. So I think it's that internal happiness that you really want to strive for.
You know, it's funny. So we didn't get to talk about this, but I can share a little bit about it. Like I started my career in financial services, then I went into tech, software sales, and then I had a recruitment agency. I was a CEO of a recruitment agency. I ran it. I was also the founder of the business for just under 4 years. And I now work for another recruiting agency that's you know, headquartered out of San Francisco. And you know, I realized that I wanted to pursue, like I think it was like me turning 40. I don't know, you'll go through this in 20 years or whatever when you get there. But you have this moment where you're like, when I look back on my life, am I going to be proud of what I did? Am I going to be excited about what I did? Or am I going to look back and think, oh man, if only I tried harder, or if only I went after it. So I think going to my 40th birthday, I had that kind of aha moment and saying like, look, I think now's a good time to get back into basketball. I think I have a lot to offer. I think I'm more business minded I'm more experienced now. I've, closed $1 million deals with NBC Sports. I've done stuff for the Olympics. I've done stuff with NBC RSNs. Like, I have like a lot of like life experience now that I can bring to the table. And, life's short, man. Nothing's like given. Like,
Mhm.
tomorrow it could all end, right? Like, I don't want to be morbid, but that's the truth. So I
Mhm.
think, when I wake up every day, I enjoy this. Like, I enjoy working with the players. I enjoy getting to know them. I have a team in the Toronto Pro-Am, and it's kicking off next week, and I'm super excited about it. Like, Toronto Pro-Am is going to be huge. There's 7 NBA guys in it last year's NBA sanctioned. It's the biggest Pro-Am tournament in Canada, and
Mhm.
I have a squad in it, and we've been working on it. It's just a great kind of thing to do, right? And I think when I look back on my life, I want to know that I spent my time wisely and it wasn't wasted.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Is there potential to move to America in the works, or is it more the idea of, or is it more the idea of getting Canadian players to the league?
I mean, look, I've built relationships with players both in Canada and both in the US.
Mhm.
And I love the United States. Like, I have a property in Florida, a rental property in Orlando, and I visit the States often. I do a lot of business with US companies. My company is a US
Mhm.
based company. So, but I love Canada, right? Like, I was born here. So I love it. So I know you've moved around and stuff like that. Um, it's a little bit harder when you have a family, right? Like, I have a 5-year-old daughter and she's
Mhm.
kind of a little bit settled. So I would never say, if the opportunity presented itself, for sure, I would approach it, but it's not like a conscious goal of mine to get to the United States.
Of course, of course. So then I guess the personal question I have for you is what motivates you?
That's a great question. Honestly, like, the short answer is winning. I'm very competitive. I've been in sales for the bulk of my career, and the thrill of the competition, like whether it's a deal I'm trying to close or this tournament I'm going to be in Toronto Pro-Am, or seeing a player that I'm helping, you know, get to that next phase in their career, whatever that may be, whether it's going from high school to college and college to the pros.
Mhm.
I think just, you know, the chase, right? And winning. And that's what motivates me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a very sports-like competitive answer you just gave. Um, that's probably the sports coming out in you, man. That's great. That's great. That's
Yeah.
definitely great. What would you say to someone that wants to be an agent per se?
Mhm.
Um, what is your advice?
I mean, I probably need some advice myself. uh Honestly though, like, all jokes aside, I think you gotta have perseverance. You gotta really be you gotta really want it, right? Because it's a big investment, not only in time and studying for the test and all that, but like that's kind of like whatever, right? But you have to have a strategy. You have to be strategic about what you're trying to do. Um, and if you're strategic and you're tenacious, um, and you persevere through the bumps, because there is going to be bumps in the road, man.
Mhm.
Like, this is not like I started a company it's a tech recruiting agency. There are a
Mhm.
lot of bumps in the road, but this is like a different beast, you know? And so I think get mentorship, get try to work with people that have experience, because it will accelerate your timeline, accelerate your growth. Now, it might not get you completely to where you need to be, right? You still need to do the work. But I think the lessons I've learned from not only Sports Business Classroom, but from working with Terrell Harris and from other things, and just like being with Kevin O'Banner at the G League, those are experiences that like are going to shape the way I view the world,
Mhm.
right? And so by seeking out those opportunities and pursuing them aggressively, and then just doing the work, like, half of this business is showing up, like, get out your house kind of thing, you know?
Mhm. Yeah.
go get in the gyms. I remember early in sports business classroom, um, there was like a mentor instructor. His name is Dan Purcell. And I really gravitated towards Dan. I really liked his approach and his honesty. And, we ended up staying in contact afterwards. And he talked about like get in the gym. Like good things happen when you get in the gym. And I couldn't agree more. Once I really started to say like, look, trying to do this on your phone, you know, it doesn't always end amazing, right? I think it's important that you really get out there and people will get to know you. That's how people get to know you, right? And this is a people business. So I think the more you're around and you can do it at your own kind of pace, right? Like maybe you just go to your local tournaments. Maybe that's what you do, right? If you don't have the resources or time to go traveling everywhere, maybe you're working a full-time job when you're doing this, like do what you can, but build your community, build your niche, and do that in person if you can, because I think that's a huge difference for me. Some of the best connects I had, I never really, it was like very organic, I went into a gym, I had no idea what was going on. I knew some players that are going to be there, but a lot of times like you have a thought in your head that, okay, I'm going to go and maybe I'm going to meet this player and whatever, and something completely different happens. Maybe that player that you went to see is a horrible game, doesn't even play hardly yet, and then there's somebody else on his team or the opposing team that you wasn't even on your radar that just walks in and completely dominates, and your whole perspective changes, right? Because now you're like, well, I came to see this player, but really this other player is the one that I should be, spending some time with and building a relationship with.
So what goes through your mind when that happens? Because obviously, as an athlete, I can attest that every now and then we have a really bad game.
Of course.
So like, do you just go watch another game to see if that's really what happened, or do you move on? How does that?
No, I mean, like you don't want to make too much out of any one game. Players have bad games. Players have good games. You'll see a guy one day and he looks like Steph Curry, and the next game he couldn't throw the ball in the ocean, right? So I think, but what you want to do is be open-minded. Like, don't always believe what the rankings tell you.
Okay.
You're gonna go to ESPN 24/7. You're gonna see this list, and they have it all written out for you. And yeah, sure. Like, is AJ DeBanza the best player in high school? Probably. Is Cameron Boozer probably the next best player? Yeah. Like those guys are studs. Like, those guys are like NBA ready. But as you get further down the list, it gets murkier, and some of the players that are deeper down the list, or maybe not even on the list, are sleepers, man. Like, and in high school, it doesn't really mean that much. It does, but it doesn't. For the super high end guys, sure, you're a top, but even like guys who are like top ranked players, like I've seen, I think it's maybe it's one of the Instagram accounts, maybe Draft Express, maybe not, I can't remember, but they post kind of like, here are the ESPN high school rankings, like, and they take like the class of like 2012 versus 2014, like which will you pick? And you see some of the names in the top 10, and like maybe only like 3 or 4 are recognizable, maybe only like 2. So where you're ranked in high school, it matters, but it doesn't matter. It matters a little bit. It definitely will help with recruiting. It'll help you get to like one of the high major schools. It'll help you kind of build that profile. But if you lay an egg in your first year and you don't perform, and then you don't perform ever, like you'll just fall off the face of the planet. So I think it's, you want to see players multiple times, and you don't want to have an open mind, right? You want to have an open mind. Don't go in just thinking like, hey, because this guy's, ranked number 12, that, he's going to be everything that the rankings say he is.
Yeah. And sometimes that could be a very big motivator. Sometimes they might get ranked like number 30. You're like, all right, let's work. let's get in the gym, and then your next season you might raise to the top like very very quickly.
I think it's honestly, like, for some players, it's better if you're just not even ranked.
Hmm.
Like, you're just getting to work. You're not getting ranked. I think for some parents, they prefer, like, I know some parents, they care about the rankings, but like some, they prefer their kids stay out of the rankings. Like, keep working, right? What matter? Like, you want to peak at the right time. If you
Yeah.
peak in grade 10, I'm sorry, but that's probably not where you want to peak,
Hmm.
right? You want to be peaking as you're like you want to be ascending, like maybe not peaking, like, because some players, they peak at 27 years old, 28, 29, right? Some
Hmm.
players, like, they don't catch their legs, and they don't figure out how to be an amazing professional NBA level player until they've been in the league 5 years,
Hmm.
right? At that point, they may be 26.
Yeah.
Um, it's all about, like, continually working, continually getting better, and continuing to ascend. And then, of course, there's some junctures where you want to, go supernova, right? Like, when you're, whether it's in your freshman year, or if you're going to be, a 4-year college guy, you know, how does your, how does that snapshot look like, in March, April, the year that you're going to declare for the draft? That's what's really important.
Do you think that over as the league progresses and as your recruiting gets a little more substantial, um, do you are there agents that just continuously fly around the world? Because I'm interested because we're finding a lot of international players get drafted now. Like
Yeah.
we are, like the international scene is just becoming a lot bigger.
Mhm.
Um, are there agents that are just constantly flying around, just trying to find? Like, how does that all work?
I would assume so. I'm probably not the best person to answer that. You'd have to ask some guys that do a lot more flying, um, in terms of, like, to Europe and
Hmm.
overseas. Um, I I do I do think that talent is definitely everywhere. You'll see that in terms of, kind of the MVP race and the NBA. I think it's been 6 years, maybe 7, since the U.S. born players won the NBA MVP. If I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken.
Something
So
like that. Yeah.
it's been a while. I think, I don't remember how many French players were drafted this year, but there was a lot.
Yeah.
You'll see more Canadian players coming in. Obviously, what Luca's doing is transcending the sport. So yeah, there's more and more talent everywhere. What I will say is, I'm in the gyms a lot in Toronto, and I can't say I know all the agents, so maybe they're there and I didn't recognize them. Like I said, there's 850 of them, and
Mhm.
I probably can only recognize maybe 50 or 60 of them, because, like, obviously Rich Paul pulled up, you're gonna know who Rich Paul is, right?
Yeah.
Um, but I would say that, generally speaking, I probably don't see a ton of agents in the gyms in Toronto, but I could be mistaken. Maybe they're there. I just don't recognize them.
Hmm. I can't help but notice that Kobe book behind you.
Yeah.
That's an amazing book. That's an
Yeah, it's
amazing book.
fantastic. Yeah, like, I love reading basketball stories, and books in general. I actually read the Phil Knight memoir, the Nike book,
Hmm. Hmm.
just recently, and I just think it's like with sports, it's such an interesting thing, right? Because there is a defined winning and losing in sports, right?
Absolutely.
In a lot of other industries, maybe you have targets to hit. Maybe your target is to make whatever, like, X amount of revenue. But if you miss it, it's not like, did you really lose? Like, So I think there's something about that kind of finality of sporting match or game, that says, like, you definitively won, right? And I think that's why I read the sports books. And obviously, I'll admit, Kobe is someone that, so Kobe died on my birthday in 2020. And so I'll never forget it. It was 2020, January. It's January 26th. That's my birthday. And I went out. My wife took me out and my daughter. We had, like, a nice day out. We had some lunch. And then I was getting to the car going home, and I got the notification. My phone's blowing up. And the word came out that Kobe passed away. And I think Kobe was, I'll admit it, he's one of those people that when he's alive, I don't think I appreciated him enough for
Absolutely.
what
Same.
for
I'm
what
good
what
too for
he
that.
was.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know? I might have even hated on Kobe a little bit for some parts of his career. Like real talk,
Mhm.
right? But like his like the whole Mamba mentality, I think is just it's special, you know, and he's a special guy. He has that kind of like mentality, right? And I think everything that he's done, you know, like there's that one piece where his teammates were uh they were kind of like joking around in like the interview after the game. And I think they had lost or something, but they were like being interviewed and they were joking around and Kobe was just like not having it, you know? And also just being like a girl dad myself, watching like how he became such a great dad for his daughters and everything. It's super tragic. So I think, you know, I keep that there to just remind me about the mom mentality and just remind me like appreciate people, you know, when they're here with you.
Yeah.
Because, you know, like so many people get their flowers after they passed away. Now, for Kobe, you know, he had millions of fans. Like, I don't think he was worried about any haters or people didn't appreciate him. But I think just the lesson for me is like, you know, like for example, LeBron. What's like the whole LeBron Bronny thing is just crazy. Like, you know, the amount of people that are hating on, you know, Bronny's a 55th pick, like whatever. Like nobody, like he's literally the most popular 55th pick of all time. Like most 55th picks, like just like nobody even cares about. Like they don't even make the G League. It's like maybe they make the G League, but like, you know, they're like irrelevant. But I think LeBron too is someone that, you know, I'll probably be honest, when I look back, maybe I didn't fully appreciate LeBron enough,
Mhm.
especially at the peak of his powers, right? What you're saying. Because like I'll be honest, like I kind of got bored of seeing like Cleveland and Golden State. For a period of time there, the regular
Yeah.
season was completely irrelevant.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
It literally didn't matter, right? Um, but yeah, I think, you know, it's special what LeBron's doing. It's special that he's going to play on the same team as his son. And, you know, hopefully for the Lakers and their organization, like it, like all the moves they made doesn't like come back to like bite them because I think LeBron's legacy is it's kind of untouchable, to be honest.
Yeah. Well, there isn't anyone else that can say they've played with their son. come come
Exactly.
to it. I mean, that's a LeBron's longevity is a different beast. Like from an athlete standpoint, I don't know how he does it. Like
It's dude. Okay, so father time comes for us all, right?
yeah.
Everybody. But when's it going to come for LeBron? Like it's unbelievable what he's doing in the league and to play at such a high level. You know, I would love to see him. You know, obviously like they won the chip in the bubble and some people put an asterisk on it and like everyone could have their opinion on the bubble championship. Um but it'd be great to see like one more like really amazing run from
Mhm.
LeBron into the finals and you know, we'll see.
Yeah. About that bubble comment, I mean, I would actually debate that that was the hardest championship to win in the last 20 years. For this reason, the bubble was just basketball.
Mhm.
Like it wasn't like you had Rihanna sitting courtside where like even your I don't know 15th player would just get distracted. There was none of that. Like it was just straight basketball. Like Jimmy Butler wasn't even shaving. Like it was just pure basketball. And I was a big fan of that bubble tournament.
I can see why. Like I get what you're saying. Um I don't know. I don't know how I feel about it. I think in some ways from a pure competitive standpoint, I feel like there were some players that didn't want to be there for obvious reasons. You know, like I don't blame them, right? But I think from a purely like basketball standpoint, there was I don't think you were getting the highest level of basketball that you would get at the NBA level
Mhm.
because of the circumstances, right? Because these guys were in hotels, they were away from their families, they were, maybe feeling homesick, they were like maybe feeling anxious about what was going on in the world. It was a tough time.
Yeah, of
So
course.
to your point, yes, it could have been the hardest to win, but I think just from a performance standpoint, I don't think that that was like the highest level of basketball because of the circumstances. So I don't know. Like, do I
Yeah,
put an
no,
asterisk beside it? Not maybe. I don't know.
I would agree with that because like as you were talking, it started reminding me like the finals didn't feel like the finals.
It
Like
didn't.
if you look at like the last Boston series, right? Like sold out tickets every game. Like
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, the most recent finals was kind of a letdown, to be honest.
you didn't
But
like it?
no, because I don't think Kyrie played well. I think Kyrie, there's definitely a mental block with going back into Boston
Yeah,
for sure with Kyrie, and so I think that held him back a little bit. I would have loved to see that series go longer. I texted with a buddy. I had Celtics in 7, and it wasn't even close to that. It was a gentleman's suite, basically. Um, but yeah, so what were you saying before that about the level of play? We were saying I had a point, but I got sidetracked.
like there were like the distractions of it. It was just straight basketball.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's that was a very strange time. Oh, now I got my point. So I have a friend. He lives in Los Angeles, big basketball fan.
Hmm.
And I asked him about how the celebration was after they won the bubble. And he's like, it was very weird. It was not normal, because people were still caught in the whole COVID
Yeah,
thing. And it was like, yeah, people were in the streets for a bit, but it just, there was something off. I think for a lot of us that, lived through that and we look back at it, we'll look at that time period, that year, 2 years, and just be like, yeah, there's something off about it.
yeah. Well, I wouldn't want to take up too much of your time, but if you could just end on telling us a little bit more about reminding the audience about Storybook, that'd be great.
Yeah. Yeah.
The floor is
Thanks.
yours.
Yeah. Thanks, Irvin. Again, I really appreciate you having me today. Uh, so again, we started Storybook Sports for the main purpose of helping players grow their social media following and do it in a way and simplifying it for the players so that they can focus on the main thing, which is basketball. So
Mhm.
our objective is to, work with players and their families to create a content strategy that makes sense for the players, to help humanize them and tell compelling stories about these players, and to get more fans, right? And to help them build that following so that whenever they stop playing basketball, whether they make it to the NBA or they stop at college or even high school, they'll have that following that they can leverage for whatever they want to do in life.
Wonderful, wonderful. And even on a personal standpoint, like we talk about adding value to like to yourself and to what you bring to the table, you got to find in our industry, you talk about a competitive edge. That's great. That's wonderful.
Yeah. So thanks everyone. I really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for joining us, man. Thank you very much.
All right.
All right.